Today you're going to learn 3 subtle but psychologically powerful things that I do during interviews that allowed me to get my very first engineering internship. And you might be thinking, oh, I probably heard this guy's generic advice before. But let me tell you, it doesn't matter if you're completely new to job hunting or if you've secured millions of job internships in the past. Because I'm going to tell you some utterly specific, fine-grained details that you either need to learn or you need to be reminded of because of how important they are to nail an engineering interview. So let me just ease up a bit because the first point is to greet the interviewer semi-casually. Now, I still viscerally remember the exact words that came out of my mouth when I started that interview for that first internship. Now, the call started and we obviously greeted one another. I asked them how they were and they asked me how I was. And when I answered that, I could have easily said, good. But I didn't say that. I said, I'm pretty good today. Yeah, it's pretty cold outside. Walking around school, but can't complain much. And then they were obviously curious, and then they said, oh, well, how cold is it there? And I said, like -3 degrees Celsius. And then they obviously chuckled because they were at a different part of the country that was extremely more cold than the place that I was at the time. So we had a bit of a chuckle together, and it sort of eased the situation. So what I did in that exact situation was shook off all those nerves that I had prior to that interview by having this semi-casual greeting. And by doing that, I not only got myself to be more confident, but I also set the tone for the entire interview. So yeah, I was super confident, almost the type of confidence that you get from joining my program that prepares you to get your first internship, even if you have 0 experience. Because I not only have a multiple hour long video course on how to make the perfect applications for any type of position in the engineering industry, but I also prepare you for interviews. And as a complete bonus, I have templates for resumes, portfolios, and cover letters. So let me put the semi-casual greeting in a way that you nerds will understand, okay? So let's imagine this red line here. Let's say this is a starting point, this red line. And let's say it's at like 25 degrees or whatever it is, and we increase it by another maybe 5 degrees. So it might look like a small change, just 5 degrees, right? It can't be that much. But when we zoom out into the larger picture, that small little detail actually tremendously impacted the trajectory of that line, you know? So the same thing goes for the semi-casual greeting. When you have that subtle detail of having a semi-casual greeting at the beginning of an interview, you set the tone for the entire interview. And this is extremely powerful because it also takes your nerves away and it replaces it with confidence. Now let's move on to the second point, which is the pause before the answer. Now here, just watch for a second and I'm going to show you 2 answers to the same question for an applicant that doesn't know how to answer a question and wasn't prepared for it. Tell me about a time you weren't able to overcome an obstacle. Yeah, so there was a time in school when it was English class and it was a group project. Situation 2. Tell me about a time you couldn't overcome an obstacle. That was a really good question. Can I just take a few more seconds to think about that? Sure. Okay, so there was this one situation where I was in English class and I was assigned this group project, right? So can you see the difference of what happens when you pause before you answer rather than just quickly answer to fill in the empty gaps of silence, right? So when you don't pause, your thoughts are not collected at all. Your mind is completely disorganized. You're stuttering and all this. But when you do pause, when you pause right here, you show a great level of maturity and professionalism. And it's actually not awkward as you might think it is, because a lot of these people on podcasts and these celebrities on interview, TV, whatever it is, they actually pause a lot before they answer because they're asking like deep questions and they want to give a deep answer that is high quality, right? So don't be afraid to pause before you answer any hard question that they might throw at you. And even if you can't answer any of the questions, any question that they throw at you, you're completely able to just say, I don't know how to answer that. I don't have an answer for that. As simple as that, you know. When you do this type of thing, you're not lying. and the interviewer knows it because you could have easily lied about some BS situation where you were made the hero or something, but you didn't. You just said that you didn't know. So when you do that, you can also gain the trust of an interviewer by doing that simple thing. So the third tip is to give in-depth questions at the end of an interview. So at the end of every interview, you are given the chance to ask any questions that you may have had of the company or of the position. Now, I don't want you to ask just the generic questions of, oh, no, what type of things am I going to be doing on the job? Or, oh, what do you like most about this company? No, don't ask any of that. I want you to ask the questions that dig deep into their bones that they literally pause when you ask that question. They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was interviewing my boss this whole time. Like, you want to ask those type of detailed and deep questions, okay? You literally want to be making them pause. Like you want them to be doing this because of how good of a question it was, okay? So let's look at a specific example. So let's say you're applying to this job as a controls engineer for an HVAC company, all right? So here's a quick example of a question that you could ask in this type of situation. Has the company taken any steps towards more sustainable or decarbonized control strategies? If so, how has the controls team been involved in meeting these types of goals? So do you see how powerful it is to ask super specific questions to the industry and to the position? Because what you're doing is not only showing that you know about that stuff, but you're also setting that solid impression that'll last until you next meet them. Because this right here, this point where you're asking that question, that's like the last thing that you're talking about with them, because that's the end of the interview. So you have this lasting impression on them until you next meet them. So this right here is extremely powerful, and honestly probably the most important thing throughout the entire interview. Now people tell you, oh, ask 3 or 4 generic questions. And to that I answer no. Actually, you have to ask really specific questions. I'd rather have, if I was an interviewer, I'd rather have a candidate ask me like 2 super specific questions like this one rather than 4 or 5 generic questions. Because when you ask those specific ones, it shows that you're actually interested, actually educated on that. And like, it's just, that's somebody that you want in your company. So answer like this or ask like this. And yeah, the last thing I want to say is good luck to you in your interview.